Well, hello everybody and welcome to the live. It feels like an absolute eternity since I last did a live. I think it's probably about 3 weeks we haven't done live, with a combination of the Viking Wi-Fi and the combination of that in Alaska, coverage not being so good. Of course, I was in Seattle and so on. So anyway, it's good to be back, and there are so many people here and loads of questions coming in, which hopefully we will catch up on and get through as many as we possibly can. Just a few bits and pieces, as if you're a regular here, you know who I am. I'm Gary Bembridge, the channel Tips for Travelers. If you can write the word question before any question, that helps me enormously spot the question from the chat, which is great. Let's do a few so that's one bit of housekeeping. Another bit of housekeeping is for the next 2 weeks after this, I'm going to have a couple of guests on. We haven't done guests for a while. So next weekend, hopefully all things going to plan, Helen and Richard of Visit With Us will be my guest. We'll talk luxury cruising, probably mostly, because that's obviously where they focus. And also the week after that, I have Walter from Where's Walter Travel on. He's one of the travel agents, one of the two travel agents that I kind of recommend people look at in the US. He's a bit active on TikTok and all sorts of things. And so he will join us the weekend after next. So that's all that. I think that's all the housekeeping. Let me do one more piece of housekeeping while we're doing housekeeping. This week's video is out. It's the follow-up to my Queen Anne video, and it's looking at the whole issue of the ship within a ship, the grills area, and so that is up now live, causing lots of discussion, debate, which is fantastic. So let's get stuck into the various questions. I just want to check on my trusty iPad, as I always do, that it's all going to plan, which it looks like it is, which is good. So I always like to kind of just keep an eye on that, so if anything's dropping. But the test I did, everything was fine. So let's have a look. We had actually surprisingly large amount of people in it. Well, actually, maybe not for this time of year. There's quite a few people who are in Alaska at the moment, because they're living there or they're on various trips. Like Peter was in Westerdam and Glacier Bay. Let's see, where's Janet's here, Claudia's here. Here we go. Here's the first question. Peter, again linked to Alaska. Is Alaska a typical 7-day cruise destination, or is it like Antarctica where 14 days feels too short? So Peter, you're right. I mean, most of the cruises that go to Alaska are 7-night cruises, sort of out of Seattle or out of Vancouver especially, and most of those kind of do inside passage. My Viking cruise I chose because it was a little bit longer, but it's still only 10 days, like the one I did on Princess, which we went from Seward, which is spelled Seaward, but it's pronounced Seward, as I discovered, and people keep telling me. And it went down to Vancouver, and that was a 10 nights. And so that was quite good because you get to see a wider perspective. I like doing the one-way route because I feel you actually get much more because you're not kind of looping back. Also, you have generally longer time in port. So I feel like a 10-day was really good because I got a mixture of seeing glaciers, visiting the key iconic towns, but also got to see places like Valdez, Icy Strait Point, and so on. So a lot of people, though, do the 7-night cruise. It is a really good taster cruise, or not taste is the wrong word. If you just have limited time and you want to see the iconic parts, do a 7-night. Do as, if you possibly can, if Peter was doing, getting into Glacier Bay, which normally means you have to go on Holland America, Princess, or Norwegian, or some of the smaller lines. There are some more like Hurtigruten, and some of the expeditions are doing slightly longer. But I think if you can go longer to Alaska, now what some people do, of course, is they do 7-night cruise and then do the land-based side, which I also strongly recommend. So Linnea's here, which is great. So Linnea was joining us last night. Last night we did a captain's, so on my patron and channel members, if that's ever of interest, we have a captain's level, and we did a Zoom call last night. Beth is back from her Regent Mariner World Cruise. I bet it was absolutely fantastic. I keep looking at those. See the World. Which luxury or premium line do you believe is the best value for money? So they are all, in reality, See the World, pretty similar. So their fares are all pretty similar. They all have pretty much the same inclusions. They all have pretty much the same exclusions, because obviously they're all really competing with each other. So in the premium side, You've obviously got Cunard obviously operate in there, Princess, Holland America, Celebrity, Disney are in there, Virgin Voyages actually in that sort of same category. So some would argue, in some ways people would argue that perhaps Virgin is a little bit on better value for money because they do have slightly more inclusions, but of course Virgin isn't for everybody in the type of cruising they're doing. But I don't think any of them are more value for money than the others. Now, people may have a different perspective, so if you do have a different perspective, let me know. On the luxury side, I'm guessing you're probably thinking, so you've kind of got two elements of luxury, because you've got the sort of luxury small ship, Oceania, Viking, Azamara, Windstar, and then you've got the sort of the ultra luxury Seabourns, regions, and I think they all end up being more or less the same value for money for that reason. So I think a lot of it then ends up around what are you looking for in the overall experience, with each one offering slightly different strengths or weaknesses. So that, in terms of pure money calculations, I think the value for money is really in what you want to get out with it. So if anyone disagrees with that, let me know. Hetty's here on Enchanted Princess, I guess, racking up her Mars at the moment. So very busy. So that sounds a little bit manic there, Hetty, but good. Thanks for joining. Mary M, I will be on a January transatlantic cruise, Southampton to Fort Lauderdale. I plan on using motion sickness patches, but don't know what to expect in terms of tiredness. So Mary M, I mean, it's a good idea to have kind of a plan in place, crossing the transatlantic. Now, because you're doing Southampton to Fort Lauderdale, I don't know if you might be doing that on Cunard, because I guess some of the world cruises head down that way. But once you get past the North Atlantic, it does tend to sort of get progressively calmer. So it's more at the beginning. So if you're using the Solpadeine patches, the behind the ear patches, you tend to find it's more a mouth issue, like a very dry mouth, than a tiredness issue with those. If you take more like Dramamine kind of pills, that tends to have more tiredness. Most people's side effect with those patches is a kind of a very dry mouth experience rather than tiredness as such. So there you go. Sarah is here, which is great to see. I hope you're feeling much better, Sarah. Sarah's just got back from a fantastic cruise. And as you might have seen if you follow Sarah on her various socials, both her business side as travel counselors, or if you're a friend of hers, personally, poor old Sarah came back from with great memories, and what's doing in the UK at the moment, COVID. So I hope you're feeling way better. Surprisingly, a lot of people seem to be getting COVID at the moment, on land, some on cruises and stuff at the moment. And I did see in the paper yesterday, there's a real uptick, certainly in the UK, of COVID at the moment, summer COVID, with the highest cases since kind of winter. So so hopefully, if anyone is out there getting, some other people that I know sent me messages saying that family and friends have got COVID. So hopefully you feel much better, Sarah. And welcome back. Claudia, next Saturday on her Queen Mary 2, New York to Southampton, any last minute do's and don'ts. So Claudia came on the Eurodam group cruise, and I'm very excited that she's finally getting to experience the do's and don'ts. I think, Claudia, don't have anything extra. The only thing I would strongly recommend is check your check-in time and keep an eye on socials, kind of X, Twitter, and Facebook groups around departure and embarkation time. There's been a couple of late arrivals. Queen Mary 2's had a couple of late arrivals on the last couple of crossings into New York. So, for example, the one this weekend, which I guess got in yesterday, it only got into New York at 10 a.m. instead of the usual. It comes sailing in under the Verrazano Bridge at like normally 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. They only got in 10, so people have got off the ship late, and everyone's being pushed back. So that will be my last kind of thing. Is at the moment, for its tidal reasons, because obviously the tides need to be perfectly right to get under that bridge. You'll see when you sail out, the difference under the Verrazano Bridge is scarily low. So I guess it's a tidal issue. So that would be my main thing. Generally, speaking, I have found, and everyone talks about, the check-in process in New York, and I'm assuming you're heading out of Brooklyn, never seems very good, and that's not necessarily Cunard's fault. It's about the port authorities and the check-in, but it's normally not great. So hopefully you have a much smoother process, heading through. Lou is here, which is great. So you're having great hot weather. We're having a terrible summer. I mean, I got back from Alaska, which was quite chilly, and it was great. We had 2 days of 28 degrees Celsius, whatever it is in Fahrenheit. Now it's back down to like 20 degrees. So yesterday was nice, and Sunday went out cycling all around the place, so that was quite good. Claudia is asking another question around the Paul McCartney's photo exhibition. So if anyone has an answer to that, that would be great. Just a reminder, write the word question. I have seen see the world. I spotted your question. I remember your WinStar video, and you said, well, I'm sort of like hiding behind there. Everybody on board seems to care less about the onboard activity. It's all about the destination, and just came off mass market cruise. I feel the same. That's interesting, because normally speaking, you find that the onboard activities on those more mass market lines, MSC, Carnival, thing are really heaving and packed. That's quite interesting to know. I guess it depends where you went to. So that certainly hasn't been my experience. That's quite unusual. I mean, I found on some of those, like when I was on Symphony, for example, even in the Caribbean, a lot of people never got off the ship because they wanted to use it as a chance to use some of those bigger, those kind of attractions, which are quite hard to get when they get there. Tom, hi there, Tom. Tom always has joins from Facebook. So this streams on Facebook and on LinkedIn, as well as on YouTube. Theoretically, I can do it on Instagram, but it's very complicated, so I keep putting it off. Anyway, so here again, long question. We're off tomorrow to London before our Regent Seven Baltic cruise. Very nice. Thank you for your recommendation for Starlight Express. We have tickets for Thursday. In preparation for our cruise, I attempted to find your cruise packing checklist. I'm having difficulty finding it on the Tips for Travelers website. Can I get a copy? Actually, that's a good point, Tom. So quite a few people have asked me around that. I did have it on the homepage, and I've taken it off. What I will do is I will put a link in the show notes for this. But actually, if you search Tips for Travelers packing tips, the article should come up. But I will put a link to that, and I will try and make sure I put a better link back on the website. But yes, so just what Tom's referring to is a revamped version of Starlight Express has just opened. In fact, its official opening, I thought, was last weekend. It was actually this weekend. So I theoretically saw a preview. And it is a theatre, not on the West End, it's out Wembley way. Those of you big football fans will know Wembley. Near the Wembley Stadium, there's this massive big theatre, which is kind of a big open space. And they built inside there, there's a whole Starlight Express, track, because it's all on road skates, for those who don't know. And it was really fantastic because it's lots of new songs, slightly different storylines and things, a little bit more contemporary storylines and stuff. But it was absolutely just fantastic. So that was good. And it's kind of interesting because I went to a matinee, and lots of people were going saying, oh my God, I saw this 20 years ago, and they're now taking their kids. So I worked out, I think I saw it in 1987. Was the last time I saw Starlight Express. But it doesn't feel a dated show to its ranges because they've updated some of those lines. Anyway, that's probably enough promotion of Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals. I'm sure he doesn't need me promoting those. Mikas asking the question, I hope that's how you pronounce it correctly. Have you visited Le Havre and visited Normandy for the D-Day experience? Any advice, suggestions? So yes and yes. So in fact, who was I speaking to recently? I think I was speaking to someone who was on my Viking cruise, who'd been they'd been on a river cruise. They'd been on a river cruise, and they'd gone to the various beach and stuff. It is, if you're very interested in history and you're particularly interested in, of course, Second World War history, it is very moving. And the excursions that they do, it's a little bit of a trek to get there and back. But the excursions, they really, they know what people respond to well. So if I would strongly kind of recommend book an excursion, because it is quite a long way away, and you want to make sure you kind of get back on time and all that, get rid of all that worry. But yes, I think it is very interesting if you're interested in history. It's quite moving. Some of the kind of the memorials and cemeteries and things like that are pretty interesting. I realized I just missed a question. So just remind, write the word questions just so I make sure that I don't miss it. So Elizabeth has asked, how is Viking doing with quality with expanded fleet in ocean? And do you still have mixed feelings about Viking? So I have just finished this week my script on Viking, which took quite a lot of cutting down. So it's not like a whole long documentary around Viking. So I will give you a couple of headlines for that. And obviously, try not to give too much away. So you watch my video Viking, which will be not next weekend, the weekend after. So this week will be all about editing it. But I still have mixed feelings. I mean, I had a great time on Viking. So, come back to your quality question is, I found, of course, the ships are beautiful. I like that you got about 7 different choices of dining in between, you know, the restaurants of speciality. I think the food is fantastic. The food is really good quality. The menus are a good size. The enrichment lecturers, you know, there are 4 lecturers on board, so and generally were very high quality. They did quite a lot in Alaska. I'd like to have done even more around just the destination side itself, but they did quite a lot of that. Service is fantastic, so definitely, you know, the consistency is great. Senior crew are there. They're constantly giving you surveys around making sure that everything's enjoyable. However, it is quite sedate and it's a little bit serious, and at times, I don't use the word dull because I actually don't use that in my video, but the thing is, in the evenings, you know, there's no casino, as you know, and because it's positioned as kind of the thinking person's cruise, or as Torsten Hagen, yeah, that's right, who created Viking talks about, it's the thinking person's cruise, not the drinking person's cruise. But I feel they almost lean a little bit into the seriousness side, and I feel they could have just a little bit more kind of energy and fun, more so in the evenings. And for me, the evenings were more challenging, probably because I was doing it solo, but you know, the shows I find really, really, really dated. I don't enjoy the shows particularly. Now, I was probably in the minority. People did enjoy the shows. The shows, they have 4 singers, you know, young, very talented, the band that performs with them. But the music is my parents' music, and I'm 65 years old. And not interested in listening to Fred Astaire movie songs, or when I go to a musical show, I don't want to listen to shows that kind of were from the 50s and the 60s and like before my time. The most contemporary songs they sang were from Les Mis, which is 25, 30 years ago, or whatever. And I like Les Mis, but that's that, you know, so I just feel the shows are very dated, very contemporary, and they're just not very, you know, the band is talented, the crew are talented, the cast are talented. They could give them much more demanding shows. So I found that was the thing. I found it a little bit sedate, a little bit serious. It was interesting because I made this point in some of the updates I did to patrons was, you know, one of the most fun things to do in Ketchikan, and it's a little bit cheesy and it's very corny, is the Lumberjack, the Great Alaskan Lumberjack show. But Viking don't offer that. I think they're probably the only cruise line that don't offer that, because I wonder that they think it's just a little bit silly. So they have much more serious excursions as options. So I am very torn. They do have great itineraries. The itinerary was great. The included excursions I feel are weak. They are either a walking tour of, you know, somewhere around the place. They did a lot of hop on hop off bus where they would give tickets. It's basically a hop on hop off itinerary where you basically get off and self-explore a number of, say, museums, for example, in Valdez, or some places we were given just an entry ticket to a local attraction. So, for example, Ice Strait Point, it was the cable car up the mountain, which was very nice. And in Seward, sorry, I'm going to keep pronouncing it wrong. In Seward, it was, you know, the aquarium, the sea life aquarium. So or it was a panoramic drive, like in Skagway's panoramic drive. So the including excursions, I feel they're at this tipping point where they either need to invest more and make them more iconic, seeing iconic sites, or they kind of need to drop them. I feel like that. So I felt like the including tours I didn't really do. So I was buying, because certainly in Alaska, there's more things I didn't want to miss out seeing. So I did have mixed feelings, but you know, they know their audience very well. You know, the audience, even the talks at 6:30 p.m. at night, kind of dinner time, were always busy. But I'm kind of mixed on them. So I did, because I found them just a little bit more sedate. And I'm not like a party animal at all. Terry, does Norwegian Cruise Line charge a solo sub when you stay in the solo cabin? So no, they have a price for those solo suites. I think they're called studios, solo studios, and they're in an enclosed area with a key controlled thing and a little lounge. However, which is a little bit to your point, Terry, is if you're ever looking at going in those solo studios, always check what the price is if you're going, say, even an ocean view, a regular inside, or even an ocean view, because sometimes, because those solo cabins are actually quite high demand, and pricing is sort of dynamic pricing, so prices flexes. So you'll sometimes find that it's cheaper to book as a solo, say, an ocean view cabin, even though you're paying a full, you know, single occupancy surcharge, as it is booking the solo cabin. So you'd always keep an eye on that, because you could potentially get a you know, an ocean view cabin for less. So they don't charge officially a supplement, but just demand sometimes pushes it up. Now they are, to their credit, because they know that it's important, they are installing many more solo options across their fleet. So that is great. Steinwold, let's see, Steinwold Madchen, and I probably might have broken up your name in the wrong way. If I have, sorry about that. Any thoughts on Antarctica cruises from New Zealand, as Argentina is the other end of the world for me? On New Zealand, it's just a few hours of flight, I guess. So I have never done a cruise out of Antarctica, but there are, of course, some lines that do. I think even including Ponant might do. And if I think right, is it Swan Hellenic? It might also be going down there. So you're going to a different part of Antarctica. So if you're going out of Argentina, something like 90% of Antarctica cruises go out of Ushuaia. The one I'm doing in end of October into November is actually going out of Chile, which actually is quite, in some ways, I'll talk about the logistics of why that's better for me, for some people. So but you're going kind of to the, what would it be, Antarctica the right way around. So it's kind of the southwest part. If you're going from New Zealand, you're going to the southeast in part of Antarctica, which is much less explored and has much less traffic. It's also, down that part of Antarctica is where you get more emperor penguins, so you might see slightly different things. So you're going to a less busy part, although often when you're in Antarctica you don't see other ships. You might see one other ship or something. So it definitely is, it's fantastic for what I understand, but it's a different experience. As I said, you're still going to see you're still going to see a mix of penguins, and I guess I don't want to be quoted on the whale sting. I don't know about the whales. So I would say it's definitely very exciting. I would love to do it because it's a different part of Antarctica. If anyone's done that passage who's in here, I would love to hear. I'm trying to see if anyone might have asked that. But if anyone's done it, but Antarctica is going to Antarctica is amazing. I'm sure whichever way, and I'm very excited that I'm heading back to Antarctica. Dean asking the question, do you find the passengers seeming to be a bit more unruly than usual? I almost had an incident involving a rude person on a scooter. Dean, that's a very interesting question. I think the simple answer is probably, and yes. I'm leaning on the probably yes. And I think it's I'll tell you what I think it's a function of. It's the same, though, as I found post-shutdown. Going to the theater is a much more stressful experience even. People, in my view, I'm probably a grumpy old man now, but there's been a lot of publicity about this, is post-COVID shutdown, is people sort of seem to have lost some of their social interaction skills or something. So there's been quite a lot of incidents, certainly in the West End, and I've also seen in reports on Broadway of just much more bad behavior, people not being as considerate of people around them. I think also what we're seeing in cruising is obviously cruises are very full. There's many more people. Often they're saying over capacity, which I guess that whole sense of is putting some strains on. There's a lot of new to cruise people. There's a significant increase in new to cruise, so they may have might be attracting different type of people or different experiences or whatever it is. But I think definitely I've found people are probably a little bit more. But I wonder if that's, I don't know. I'm sort of sociologists would have a better perspective on that. I don't know whether this is sort of like we're becoming more badly behaved post-COVID, but I feel that it has been. Jerry asks, if anyone else has a view, it'd be great to know if you think the same. Jerry asking a question which I get asked a lot. Have you ever, or would you ever go on an ambassador cruise? I haven't been on an ambassador cruise. I feel like I should go on an ambassador cruise because people ask me a lot, but I don't have any specific plans. And certainly my cruising calendar is booked all the way through to kind of mid-25 and the end of 25 at the moment. So I'm not sure if I will be adding in an ambassador cruise, but I do get asked that a lot. So I feel I almost should go on it because it is asked so much. Alice, boarding Viking Sky tomorrow. I've been on Viking Sky, did the minute on Viking Sky to cruise around the British Isles. Should we expect much seasickness or helicopter rescues? Well, hopefully you won't get helicopter rescues. I guess you're referring to that incident out of Norway. So it can be, if you're going all the way around, sitting around, if you're doing a full proper circumnavigation, it can get a little bit bumpy as you head around the top and over the top of Scotland and the North Sea, can be a little bit choppy and a little bit bumpy. And of course, seasickness will depend on how you react to that. So I would just make sure you kind of, whatever works for you, whether it's patches you talked about earlier or seasick pills or anything like that. Susan, pushing off the dock in Edinburgh on Oceania Serena. Oh, that's great. I have a fantastic time. I love those small R-class ships. Cheryl, any tips for visiting Ephesus, Kusadasi in August, heading there on Celebrity and finishing the Xmas? Well, definitely, if you're going to Ephesus, I would go and see Ephesus. It's amazing. I don't know, when I was there, we were there on Silver Sea, on Silver Sea, and we had a late night departure, and they did, no, it was Seabourn, sorry, it was on Seabourn, and they did a late night tour of Ephesus, which also was with music and stuff. And quite a few cruise lines, if they're staying late or overnight, have this late night event, which I would try and do if you can, because it's very atmospheric. It's all lit up. They have classical music, and it's normally quite busy. So quite a few cruise lines and people do that. So if that is an option, I would do that. It's quite good. The downside is you don't get to explore Ephesus. Kusadasi is very touristic. I'm not a massive fan of it personally, but there's lots of kind of tourist trap shops in my view. Lots of restaurants and stuff. They are very geared towards tourists and stuff. But I definitely see Ephesus. August, of course, it's going to be very hot. So it's been very hot and very busy. So kind of be ready for that. Get a reminder, write the word question, because I know there's lots of questions coming in without questions. I'm trying not to miss those. Francis, hi there, Francis. Talking about doing the Gate 1 tour. Lots of people do the Gate 1 tour. And the Danube River Cruise, I don't know if you've seen, there's been very high water levels in Europe at the moment, which is affecting river cruising quite significantly. In fact, a couple have been cancelled just because they can't kind of go anywhere. So that's kind of quite annoying. Mary asking, do I have an interest in Explorer journey? Yes, I have that booked, and I think it's only for next year. I think it's only in April. I'm doing a 10-night and that. I'm really, really intrigued to try Explorer because they are getting very strong ratings. It's very interesting. I see lots of discussions in the Facebook groups for things like in the Silver Sea groups, the Seabourn groups, talking about how people from there from those kind of lines are trying Explorer, loving the Explorer experience, particularly the food. So I'm really, really intrigued, really intrigued to try it. Your mama. Viking will be shifting our cruise stop to Haynes. Haven't been there on previous tours. Any tips to maximize it? Now, I haven't been to Haynes, but when I was on this trip, a lot of people were talking about, I was talking about different excursions in different places, etc. And people were actually spoke very highly of Haynes, but I have not been there. So if anyone has been there and has any good tips, please let your mama, that's a great name, Barry saying be careful with patches. Ken goes cruising. Yes, so Ken, good to see you here. Ken, thanks for joining. Ken goes cruising, of course, have a YouTube channel if you haven't followed before. So let's have a look. Bonnie asked a question, but didn't get the question done. Ken goes cruising has actually his question. What's your opinion of the Queen Elizabeth terminal at Southampton? Now, Ken, to be honest, I get confused between all the different terminals. I'm pretty rubbish. I actually sail surprisingly few times out of Southampton. I hardly ever sail out of Southampton. 21 I did because it was our only option. And this, I've sailed once in the last, since 23, 22, did I sail out of Southampton? I don't think I did. 23, I didn't sail out of Southampton, and I haven't sailed out of Southampton. So I always get confused which terminal is which. The Mayflower terminal was the last couple of ones that I've cruised out on. So I seem to remember that the city terminal is pretty good. The one that, what's going to call it, MSC use is pretty good. So the Queen Elizabeth one, I guess, is that funny one where you drive in, you actually drive your car in to drop off. And I seem to remember it's quite sort of very dated. That's about as much as I can. Sorry, I can't help you more, but that's what I do. Janet asking if anyone's been on Celebrity Eclipse. Yes, be good to add. Celebrity Eclipse, of course, is the ship that the September group cruise is on. So that would be good. Dean asking about Viking Mississippi River cruise. I would love to do the Mississippi. I would love to do the Viking ship. It's very expensive. What I have noticed is they have changed the itinerary quite a bit. Dean, I don't know if you've been tracking it. They used to start much further up the river. Now they do, they start, sort of, they go, between Memphis and New Orleans, but they start much further down the river. So they do more of a Memphis kind of pre-stay now, and there's quite a long kind of bus ride down. I can't remember the name of the place they start. So I guess it's water levels, because there was an issue with the Mississippi was it 1 or 2 seasons ago, where even cargo ships that are very important in the Mississippi couldn't get up and down. So it feels like it's a shorter cruising experience. I would love to do it. Now, every time I talk to people in the US and when I'm on cruises saying I want to do the Mississippi, they all pull a face and go like, it's a muddy, dirty river and it's really boring. But I am really interested in the history of the kind of the South. I'd love to see Memphis. I'd love to see New Orleans. I'm very interested in the whole slave trade and that whole thing and just the history of that, I guess the Civil War. I'm very interested in it. And I think if one is really interested in that, my understanding is the actual cruising part is, say, not as scenic as cruising. That's my understanding. But I really would like to go on there. Alberto, I'm going on my first Queen Elizabeth cruise in 3 weeks. Super excited, fantastic. I'm confused with the dress code during the day and for activities on the boat. Yeah, I think probably have confused the living daylights out of everybody sometimes, and certainly the groups. If you've been following Cruise Critic on Facebook, whenever there's a dress code during the day, you can pretty much wear whatever you want to. Is a simple answer. So obviously nothing that's obscene or inappropriate or provocative or whatever, but you can wear shorts, you can wear T-shirts, you can wear jeans, you can wear flip-flops, you can wear sandals and socks, you can wear whatever you want to. So certainly during the day, there's no real dress code in the day. There's things like you can't wear swimsuits in public, you can't wear swimsuits into the King's Court, the buffet, stuff like that. So kind of just sensible things. But during the day, you can wear whatever you want. Then they have their 2 dress codes in the evening, formal night, or they call it now gala night, or they encourage people to wear tuxedos, glamorous gowns, or a suit and tie, which you need to wear to get into the restaurants. Certainly, generally speaking, people follow that. On the small casual night, you can get away with a short sleeve shirt and slacks. It's definitely not as fussy as it used to be. Some good feedback there on the Eclipse and Star Express as well. Steve asking the question, we'll be on Orion on September the 1st. Okay, so that's what I was on. What, if anything, has Viking changed, done better, or not done as well compared to your previous Viking cruises? So, Steve, I will dive into that a little bit more in the video, which comes out next week. And hopefully you heard some of the discussion a little bit earlier on that. So I don't think much has changed, to be honest, on Viking. They haven't actually evolved that much. The one change they've made, which they've then sort of slightly cancelled out, is Viking used to have terrible Wi-Fi. I do think they sort of think maybe people on Viking are less keen with the internet, may be true. But they introduced Starlink. But what they've then done, because they include Wi-Fi within your fare, is they block streaming, which is very frustrating because I was unable to, keep up with shows. There's certain shows that I watch, which are sort of like reality kind of competition shows like Sewing Bee or whatever, or like I was watching Doctor Who and whatever was coming out, but I couldn't stream it, but I couldn't use a VPN to then, because, you have to download shows, some shows like that. You have to show that if it looks like in the UK, to be able to download the show, to log into my iPlayer account and stuff. But you can't do any of that. Now, I know it's probably made a little bit worse by being in Alaska, but they've kind of upgraded to Starlink and then could have almost like dialed it back. So that was a little bit frustrating, but nothing else. It was actually incredibly similar. There was very little that had changed. And hopefully you heard the thing earlier around, what I saw as the pros and cons of that. And I said, I'll probably dive into that a little bit more because I'll talk a little bit more about what I was expecting to change and what hadn't changed. I'm trying to think if there's anything else offhand that it's worth talking about now. I think that's probably all, Steve, but hopefully the video next week, and it'll give you time to watch that before. On Orion, by the way, the planetarium wasn't working because, they have, I think there's 2 ships, it's Saturn and Orion. have the planetarium thing, and it wasn't working. It was just closed. So I don't know whether that's permanently closed or whatever. It sort of was kind of strange because it takes up such a massive part of the up area of the Explorer Lounge. And I've never seen the shows they do, but to me it felt like almost we were to rip it out and just have a bigger Explorer Lounge. But anyway. Deb, another question from Facebook. When leaving from Southampton, how do you recommend getting from Heathrow to Southampton? And where do you recommend staying the night before the cruise? Should we plan to come more than a day in advance to see any specific sites in the area? So Deb, there's actually surprising from Heathrow. There's not a lot of options. So there is, so for example, like Hetty did this, because I met up with Hetty at Heathrow before she did, there is a bus service that goes from Heathrow down to Southampton, which is pretty inexpensive. I guess it takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, depending on traffic. And it's it's very efficient, runs regular departures. So if you're looking for a pretty cost-effective way, a reliable way, that's a good way of doing it. It's National Express is the name of the company that runs that. There is the other way from Heathrow is sometimes, depending on your cruise line, they may offer transfers. So it's worth looking at if they're offering a meet and greet transfer bus service with some they'll do a package with a transfer and an overnight stay package. So it's worth looking if your cruise line does that, if you want someone else to worry about it. Or you can do one of the hire companies. So for example, like Black Lane, although they are quite pricey, but they will do a service, but it is going to cost you maybe £200 to do that. Maybe 175, 200 pounds. It'd be really expensive, but that's kind of a luxury kind of car. But also other car. If you go to something like Holiday Taxis as a site, you can often put in there and you can get quotes on that. But certainly I know people like Hetty has used the bus on her trips, and I think she's very happy with that. Now, in terms of where to stay in Southampton, there's a range. There's not a surprisingly limited amount of choice. So we've stayed before at the Harbour Hotel, because I tend not to stay down often in Southampton if I'm staying at Southampton. But there is the Harbour Hotel, which is very beautiful. Their prices can be crazy expensive. Their prices are very all over the place. So sometimes it can be like £400 a night, and sometimes it can be like 100 and something pounds a night. But that is probably the smartest hotel. There are, and I like the Moxie, which I know Hetty stayed at, which is becoming very popular. I haven't said it's a slightly quirky hotel. There is a Holiday Inn, which is really near some of the terminals, is another one that's very popular. I stayed there. I was less keen on it. And then there is also, like if you were looking for a more budget option, take a look at like a Travelodge. There's some Travelodge ones there. They're a chain of kind of really good value hotels, a very reliable kind of hotels. So take a look at those. Also, Paul and Carol love to travel, and Jamie, oh my goodness, I've got Jamie's name of his channel. They actually do cover a lot of the hotels, and they have a lot of hotel reviews. Jack, hi there, Jack. Jack has just left a super chat, so it pops up here, so I'll do it, and then let me find it and come back, because otherwise when it alerts me, it then disappears. So Jack is also one of my faithful channel members, which is great. Jack, what is the single woman to single man ratio on cruise ships? Does it vary among cruise lines? If so, how? Does it vary depending on tier of cruise line, luxury versus budget? So Jack, in reality, you will generally find, and I don't have data on this, I'm just looking at what I've observed and followed, etc. But pretty much women are way more likely to travel solo than men. So generally speaking, if you ever go on any cruise line that I've ever been on, if you go and look at the solo meeting, you will find it's almost always all women. Now that of course could be a function of men not necessarily going to the solo meetup. But generally speaking, my observation would be that no matter on the cruise line, it's almost always more likely to be single woman. I mean, for example, on Silver Sea, when I was on recently, I think there was one. I tend not to go to the solo meetups, but I always go and have a look at them and see what's going on. There was maybe 10 to 12 women, one man, same on Cunard and stuff. So I would say if I was guessing, I would say it's easily 8 to 2, 9 to 1. It's way more single women. Women seem to be much more comfortable solo cruising. And I haven't seen that differ by line. Now, it is possible, because it's hard to tell on those big mega ships, if there's more, what the mix would be there. But certainly on all the ones I've been on, the premium lines, the Holland Americas, Princess, Celebrity, those kind of things, I would say it's definitely a single man. But I mean, the advantage is if a solo male traveler is certainly going to be surrounded by many women if they go solo. If I give you also as an example, if I look at my group cruises, the 3 group cruises that I've got, a lot of solo travelers have booked those. Something like, I think for Panama, maybe 20 of the people who've booked are solo. Don't quote me on the exact number. I think even for this one that's coming up. And again, it's probably about 7 to 8 out of 10 would be women who've booked those rather than men. So women seem much more comfortable to go solo, which is very interesting. Echo Bravo with a nice picture of Concorde. I'm on Cunard Queen Anne, July 2025 for a 7-day to Norway. Will being Cunard help you? The numbers kid load? Just thinking about your conning stuff. Well, certainly being Cunard, kids will tend to be fewer kids for sure. And July is probably just as school holidays are starting. And there are a lot of options out of the UK to go to Norway. So there probably will not be massive amount of kids. I mean, Christmas time, it will be rammed, but even in kind of August time, it's not necessarily rammed with kids as such. The kids clubs are quite small on Queen Anne. I mean, I know people go on Cunard because they like Cunard and they always say, my kids have a great time on Cunard. I don't have kids, so I probably can't judge, but I always feel it's a bit mean taking kids on Cunard. There are so many better lines for kids, but certainly people who've been on Cunard with kids have actually spoken very highly of the kids clubs. But I went and had a look at them; they're really small compared to even if you go to Holland America, their club HAL is way bigger. So you're likely to not have huge amounts of kids at that time. You won't be certainly swamped by kids, definitely not. Mark, hi there, Mark. We are doing a Queen Mary 2 round trip to New York in August in Princess Grill. I have a bid for an upgrade to Queen's Grill. Do you think Queen's Grill is worth the extra cost? This is a question I get asked a lot, and I have a video, Mark, which you might also want to go and look at, which is, I think it's called something like, I can't remember the exact title, but if you just do Google, if you go to my channel and Google Cunard, I do actually dive into this sort of in more detail, where I talk a little bit about, do you get a real experience even without going to the grills? And then I talk about some of the differences between Queen and Princess Grill. Personally, I mean, if your budget can stretch to it, I would, for the transatlantic, look at going for the upgrade. I would also, by the way, look at what the current pricing is, because some of these upgrades, you can often end up paying more than actually if you just ask your travel agent to upgrade. So just have a look at what the actual, if you were to upgrade anyway to Queen's Grill, Q6 cabin or whatever, which is what I would normally book, then if I was going Queen's Grill on Queen Mary 2, I would normally book Q6. It's a very nice cabin. Without, once you get the others, they get crazy prices. But the advantage of that is, on a crossing, a lot of it is about the dining experience. So obviously Princess Grill and Queen's Grill will have the same core menu, but on Queen's Grill, you can then go a little bit exotic. So you can have caviar every night if you want, without paying anything more. If you like caviar, if you're in Princess Grill, it'll cost you $60 per person. But also in Queen's Grill, you can order off menu. So it's really around if you want to have that whole dining experience. Also, being a transatlantic crossing, you might spend a little bit more time in your cabin. So the difference in size between a Princess Grill cabin and a Queen's Grill cabin is quite significant. So so actually you might, because of the nature of a crossing, you might actually spend more time in your cabin just hanging around or whatever. So that's actually nicer having the extra space. However, the deck, which is pretty rubbish, to be honest, is a grill's deck, and it's a rubbish deck on Queen Mary 2. And with the weather, even in July, you're probably not going to use the deck very much. So that's not going to change. The lounge, which is okay, is the same lounge. So it's really around if you would like a little bit more space and you think that you would use that different dining experience. If you're not going to use the different dining experience, I would say Princess Grill, because you are going to have pretty much the same menu. There are items you can order off menu in Princess Grill. In Queen's Grill, there are more items you can order. You can order things like the beef Wellington and a few other bits and pieces which you can't in Princess Grill. But if you're not going to really take advantage, bigger cabin doesn't really bother you, and you're not going to want to eat caviar and order off menu, then it's probably, from a price perspective, not so. You are going to get a butler obviously in Queen's Grill, but and you're going to get some free booze in your cabin. But price-wise, you're going to pay a damn sight more. So it depends if those things are really important to you. So let's have a look. Adrian, on your own terms, hoping to get more details cleaned up about the Alaska cruise on Viking. Will you be posting videos about your experience? Some questions about that cruise. So yes, yes. So I was. People haven't asked that much about Alaska and whatever. So yes, I will have. So next week, the weekend after next, will be a video coming out in more detail about Viking, and the weekend of that a little bit more dive, updating some of my Alaska stuff. So yes, absolutely, there will be. Love the Dammerjack, Sarah. Yes, I agree with Sarah. So Beth, this is my same criticism I had with Regent, is their music was so dated. It was bizarre. And what they didn't have on Viking, though, is they didn't have an ABBA night, which pretty much everyone else seems to have. They didn't have an ABBA, they didn't have an ABBA night. Bob, hi there, Bob. Our Arctic Norway cruise next Monday, very nice. Got euros on your advice. The Apex is based in the UK this year, and next would be sterling. Be okay for extra tips. Have only given euros. So bear in mind the onboard currency will of course be US dollars. So the crew are never going to turn their nose up at money. Dollars is always preferred by crew because that's the currency that is most helpful for them, particularly if Filipino, other Asian crews. Dollar is a very powerful. It's the most easily currency. It's the currency that's used even on board. So if you want to give sterling, no one's going to turn down a sterling tip, but they will always prefer dollars. But so that I always tip dollars. The only cruise line where I don't tip in dollars would be if I'm going on like P&O, for example, where everything's in sterling. So the crew, they're setting out of the UK. Every passenger on there's a Brit. Everyone's given, everything's in sterling, and they will be given sterling because people aren't going to go change. So that I tend to in dollars. But like I said, no one's going to turn down a sterling tip. And you're right, being in the UK for a period of time, they'll be able to do whatever they're going to do with those. But they don't spend a lot of money on land, so they're not ideally not going to want a lot of sterling tips in reality. Deb, following up on your response to the Viking question, what comparable cruise line do you prefer like the best? I still have good enrichment, but a little more contemporary or fun offerings too. So Deb, you're right. Viking absolutely, of their equivalents, which is Windstar, Azamara, Oceania, that's in the same sort of category. Viking are way ahead in terms of enrichment. So the closest probably is Oceania, which has an enrichment program, which is okay. It's pretty good. It's not brilliant. They have the same speakers a lot. I mean, every Oceania cruise I've been on has actually had the same guest speaker. So they don't have as many guest speakers. So again, it comes back to that kind of balance of what you're looking for. But certainly Oceania has a bit more energy around it. The shows are a little bit more energetic and a bit more buzz. They do have the casino, so maybe I'm a little bit biased by that. But so I don't want, although I'm not saying Viking's terrible. It's just that I just wish they had a bit more oomph. But if enrichment is really, really important, good food is really, really important, and then Viking are incredibly strong in that. But definitely Oceania is probably their closest in reality, I would say, and they definitely do have a bit more. Beth, when you were in Juneau, you mentioned that you booked a Glacier helicopter tug sleigh separately from the cruise line. Out of curiosity, what company? Okay, so Beth, I actually booked it through the cruise line. So sorry if I misunderstood. I think I was asked by someone around booking that separately, and I did suggest that people have a look at like Venture Ashore, for example, or Shore Excursion Group. So I booked it through the cruise line because those excursions are quite limited, even though I did talk to the helicopter company that runs them, the one that we did up to the Mendenhall Glacier, and they do quite a lot. On a day they can do, which they were doing 6 to 10 a day or something like that. But they sell out really. Bear in mind in Juneau, there's 6 ships often in, so they sell out really quickly. So my tendency would be to try and lock it in by booking a cruise line one, which you can often cancel. I would also though look and see whether whether like Adventure Shore has that option. They will be a little bit less costly, but not necessarily as dramatic. It's a hugely costly trip. It's $600 and something to go, massively expensive, but it is a remarkable experience. Let's have a look. Sue and Phil's Travels. Good question. Like, what did I enjoy pre-cruise in Seattle? So for those who don't know, I decided, because I had to get to Anchorage and I'd never been to Seattle, and it was sort of on the same time zone, and I could direct flight to Seattle. Instead of doing what I did last time, which is go to Vancouver and then on to Anchorage, I flew to Seattle and I spent a couple of days in Seattle. And I actually would like to have almost spent at least one more day in Seattle. I think I had 3 days in Seattle, 2.5 days in Seattle. I absolutely found Seattle fascinating. So there were so many things that I absolutely loved in Seattle. I just thought the Air Museum was just incredible. I thought the Space Needle was fascinating. That 60s kind of iconic thing, but I found all the history of that amazing. The Museum of Pop Culture opposite, I thought was fantastic. I was less keen on Pike's Market, which I feel was a bit sacrilegious. Everyone's very upset when I say it. It was just, to me, it was a very nice market. I can see what people like. It was just really busy. I did go. It was kind of dumb because I could have gone on the Monday instead of the Sunday, but I went on the Sunday. And what else did I do? I can't remember. Those were kind of the things that came into my head. I would like to have stayed long because there were other museums I'd like to see, and I believe you can also do some of the Boeing. Have a museum you can go and tour through, which I'd like to have done. But I thought Seattle was fantastic. I would really like to go back and just spend a little bit more time. The city was fantastic. I did something in Seattle. I also went up. Oh my goodness, what was it called? No, anyway, the Space Needle. Space Needle was fantastic. But I thought Seattle was great. And I did a patron and channel members meetup, and that was great as well when we were there. So let's have a look. I'm sure I'll probably offend, but it looks like I've probably offended some Viking people. But Viking is great. It's sort of like, but they know their audience so well. It's always nice when you go online. I was saying to people even on Viking is, like going on Royal Caribbean. I was talking to people in Viking about this. Going on Royal Caribbean is not for me. But what I love about Royal Caribbean is they know their audience so well, and they know how to manage huge crowds of people, and they just master it, and their entertainment is amazing. I get excited. Maybe it's a marketing person to me when I go on. Anyway, Lisa, can you speak about the quality of food on Viking versus Cunard? So that's quite interesting. So I would say if you're comparing, because on Cunard you've got different sort of food. So if you're in Britannia Club, you have a Britannia menu. If you're in the Grills, Queen's Grill, Princess Grill, you have a Grills menu, which is done by a separate kitchen. So I would say, you probably, and because if you're comparing the fare price, I would probably say if you're going to compare Viking food, you need to compare it to the Grills menu, because in reality, the price is so much higher. So you can't really compare a Britannia menu, which, because that's not as good as Viking, in my opinion. It's a good menu, but it's not as good as Viking, but Viking you're paying much more for. So it's more of that Grills experience. So I would say probably Cunard Pip Viking overall, just in terms of the sophistication of the food. But it's pretty close in reality. I mean, you're also paying the same price per day in reality. So what you can get on Cunard in the Grills that you can't get on Viking is you can order more off menu. You can get some more side, table side. They'll come in if you've ordered something like Dover sole. They'll come and do table side. But the menus are good. So I would say it's kind of they're matched, but Cunard just has a little bit more elegance to it, a little bit more flair, if you like. But certainly, but you're paying that same sort of price as a Grills thing, and so it's pretty matched. I would say Cunard probably nudge it. But the food was fantastic on Viking. You're talking the kind of nuances, and it's a little bit like I was saying on the earlier questions. For me, some of it is a little bit of that kind of experience of the whole thing. Some good questions, some good points there on extra tips on your mamas from your mama on Ephesus. Jackie is a solo traveler. solo travel is quite a challenge. I think you're right. You do need to be kind of a certain kind of person that wants to go solo traveling and happy that it may or may not work out, that you meet people. But what I would say, Jackie, is have a look. I've got a couple of videos around solo travel. I'll try and maybe put a link in there. But if you go to my page, Tips for Travelers on YouTube, just search solo, and there's a couple of videos will come up. And because there I talk a little bit about both the price issue, how you can deal with the fact that on most cases you're paying double, what your options are and how some options to get around that with some solo travel agents, some solo people who host solo cruises, things like that, where they find ways of mitigating that. Lines that do solo deals or have solo cabins, for example. I also talk a little bit then about how you can kind of meet people and engage with people so you don't feel too alone. In reality, it's quite easy, but there's certain things, there's solo meetups in certain lines. They didn't actually have one on Viking, which is interesting, because I guess not that many people go solo as many people go solo, or maybe on my setting there weren't many people solo, so they didn't host one. But there's solo meetups, so you can get to meet people. And then also talk a bit about how do you kind of meet people, because the good on many cruise lines, when you go to the dining room, they'll ask you if you want to share tables. That's one way of meeting people, going on excursions. So have a look at those videos, and if they don't answer the questions, you have other questions, drop me a line as well, and I'll see if I can help you more specifically. But hopefully that will help you. I'll ask you a question about private transfers. So hopefully my earlier question did. I mean, Black Lane is very good. It's very expensive, but they are very, very good. Okay, outdoor adventure series. Who is the cruise official to contact if I'd like to offer an enrichment program? So this is a whole kind of complicated. It's almost like a whole. I did talk about making a video, but I did talk to Chris Frame, who talks. You may know is a maritime historian who does talking particularly on Cunard. There's so many different ways in. So one of the ways in is there are a number of speaker agencies that work with different cruise lines. So if you actually just Google cruise speaker agencies, a couple will come out. Now the downside with going through that is that you will normally have to pay them a fee. So bear in mind, cruise lines do not pay people to talk on their cruise ships. They don't pay people to run arts and craft classes. What they will do is they will give you a cabin on a ship. They will normally pay your cost to get to the ship, and they may or may not give you an allowance when you're on board to cover costs. But some of them will let you say go as a host on excursions, so you go as the cruise line representative, so you can go on excursions. But you, generally speaking, will probably be a little bit out of pocket or whatever. But normally you can often take a +1. So you're not going to be paid if you go as an enrichment speaker. Now, if you're a real, some of the celebrity people get are, people who are celebrities go. So if you go on a Cunard, if you go on Cunard, there's normally say 4 guest speakers. One of them will normally be, a kind of a celebrity. So for example, we had on our Queen Anne one, there was 3 on, but towards the end there was Will Carling, who is a very well-known ex-England rugby captain. Like, he would have been paid a fee to go on that as well as his thing. But generally speaking, you're not going to get paid. So that's one way, and is through the speaker agency. So they will charge you a fee to find you placing. The second thing to do is actually just contact the cruise lines themselves. So you need to normally contact, if you often Google a little bit, and try and find out who's on a cruise line is in charge of kind of the entertainment program, because they are the ones who kind of design that. Once you can find a way, and another way of doing it is just looking at a cruise line. This one that you particularly want to do. If you look who the PR if you go to the media and look who the PR contact is, just drop an email to the PR person saying, look, I'm very interested in pitching an enrichment. Could you tell me the contact for cruise line X is that you represent? They are normally quite good at steering you through there. And the other thing to do, of course, is if you're on a cruise and they have guest speakers on, is just ask them they're in. So they may have a contact that they're prepared to share with you. But quite often what happens is, like, some people have just been approached by, for example, one of the people that we met a couple of years ago, who now runs their arts and craft classes on a number of cruise lines. They started off on Cunard. In fact, they've done the whole world cruise on Cunard, running the arts and craft classes, but now they've done it on Azamara, on Oceania. And what happens, the other cruise lines have seen them doing it. They've been on cruises where they've done it, and they've then been invited to go on those other cruise lines. So it's a little bit of a roundabout way to get in. The same is, I think that's the way that Chris Frame started, is a person who was speaking on Cunard Bill Miller, who's a fantastic, also maritime historian, was very encouraging of Chris and his wife, Rochelle, and actually recommended them, as I understand it, to Cunard to take a look at them. So it's a little bit of like who you know and stuff. So it's a very long-winded way of answering your question to say it's quite complicated way of doing it. But individually finding out who the point person is and pitching them would be the key. Some people are offering some tips on Haynes, which is good. Cindy, do you typically fly in more than one day ahead of your cruise if you experience a significant time change? I dread jet lag and trying to decide. So 100%, even if I'm doing it in Europe. So if I'm flying to getting a cruise out of Barcelona, for example, there are 5 flights a day, 6 flights a day, even on British Airways alone, I will still go in the day before. So it's really, really important, not only from a jet lag perspective, but for example, my last Oceania trip we did, there was something like nearly 20 people were refused embarkation because their flights were delayed. They got to the port before the ship had left. However, we were due to set sail at 6 p.m. They got there at 5 p.m., but they were not allowed to board because the customs and immigration rules close an hour before the ship sails, and they weren't allowed on. So even just those delays things. So that's a key reason for coming in a day before. So I go in, and you're right. If it's a jet lag, I will go in a couple of days before. So I'll give you an example. My next my next 3 trips are all long haul. So I'm going to Australia next month to do the Kimberley. So I'm actually building in 4 days, I think it is, to basically get into the zone, because it's a long way to go, and I was a site I want to see, so I'm doing that. When my group cruise out of Boston, I'm going in 2 days before, so I have 2 or 3 nights to kind of get a little bit in the zone, and then my one after that is in Antarctica, where we have to fly to Santiago. Again, I'm building in 2 days. It's a combination of so if there's flight delays, some flights get cancelled for a whole day. I don't have to worry about that, and that's happened before when we've had to scrub around. Sarah's had to scrub around to get me onto Panama or whatever. Plus, then there's less stress in getting into the zone. And I want to be, if I'm paying all the money to go on a cruise, I want to really be in the zone, as it were. So definitely that's what I would do. So we have churned through an hour, and I'm sure there's loads more questions coming in, which I appreciate. But thanks so much for joining me. Just a reminder that next week we have, hopefully all things going to plan, Helen and Richard from Visit Us will join us, where we will hopefully talk a little bit more around luxury travel, but of course you can ask anything that you want to ask. So thanks for joining me. I will have a look through the questions, see if there's other ways that I can answer them, but hopefully I will see you next week. Hopefully you have a great week. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks for joining me.